All right, YouTube, we're back with video number 2. Just got through with the first Murktide video. Now we're doing the second one. Changing up the deck list a little bit. This is another pretty cool list I found with like 2 copies of Blood Moon in the main, 2 Seasoned Pyromancer, cut down to 2 Murktide, cut the 4th Dragon's Rage Channeler, moved, what was it? Drop the Archmage's Charm. So cut 2 Archmage's Charm for 2 Blood Moon, 2 Seasoned Pyromancer for the 3rd Murktide, and the 4th Dragon's Rage Channeler. Take a little advantage of this aggressive red mana, as well as cut the triple blue cards. In the sideboard, added the 2nd copy of Subtlety, the 2nd copy of Fury for the 2 Blood Moons that we moved to the main, and then dropped the 2nd Mystical Dispute for a 3rd Flusterstorm. So we'll go through the matches with this list real quick. Don't think there's much to say that we didn't say in the first video. Like, deck performed very well there. Kind of expecting similar results here. So let's go ahead and hop into some of these matches. So 5, that one. Match number 1. Win the die roll. Great place to be. We've got Ragavans. We've got Unholy Heat, Expressive Iteration. Like, I think this deck is just far and away the best Ragavan deck in the format, because you get to follow up Ragavan with both like counter spells for their interaction and removal spells to deal with their blockers. So you just kind of have everything covered. Like, a lot of decks that are playing Ragavan can stop your opponent from killing them with counter spells, or can remove threats out of the way. Not a lot can do both pretty consistently. So, all right, turn 1, Hallowed Fountain, Sigarda's Aids. We're against Hammertime. So let's pass it over. Inkmoth, go. Take a Murktide, because worst case scenario, Murktide can stand in front of an Inkmoth Nexus pretty well. Flash in a Reality Chip. Block. Fine. So kind of my thought here is with Channeler plus Iteration, and I've got a land drop, I'm kind of hoping I can hit Delirium so that I can just like Unholy Heat the chip, get the Channeler up to a 3/3 flyer to be able to like chump block the Ink Moth in case they've got a hammer in hand. And this Mishra's Bauble means I'll be able to do just that. So let's bauble, flip over something we don't care about. Kill off this Reality Chip. This Channeler airborne, so we're not just like dead on board to an Ink Moth. Cauldron on top is fine. So this is probably pretty greedy. I decided to just like give them a draw. They missed their land drop last turn. I've got Delirium for the Unholy Heat, so I can kill off the Esper Sentinel. Get an attack in. I'm kind of just hoping that like I land this Murktide and my clock is big enough to where like I just don't care as long as I don't die. And if they do miss the land again, then they can't animate the Ink Moth and strap up a hammer to it. So and I'm fine delving everything for this 8/8 Murktide because I know I've got Lightning Bolt coming off the top, which means I can just play the Ragavan, kill this Ragavan, keep the original one, and then Lightning Bolt, and that'll give me Delirium. So I can get this Channeler back in the air very easily. But since opponent tapped out to strap up a Stoneforge Mystic, we'll just take the lethal Lightning Bolt. So on to game 2. Hammertime, from what I hear, is a pretty bad matchup for Murktide. So I'm interested to see how it goes. Board out some Ragavans because they get stonewalled really easily. Seasoned Pyromancer, Expressive Iteration, both a little bit clunky. Maybe there should be more benefit to bringing in Subtlety, like over the 4th Ragavan, maybe a Dragon's Rage Channel or something like that, to be able to answer like the, what's it called, Sanctifier on Vex, or just like stop a Stoneforge from coming down, something like that. I don't like having 2 Blood Moons in the hand, but Blood Moon's like a very reasonable card in the matchup, so kind of saying we'll deal with it. Turn 1 Esper Sentinel, turn 2 Second Sentinel. Doesn't look good for the home team. Plus the Spell Pierce, they get to draw a card and keep their Sentinel alive. This is just like worst case start for us. Like they draw a card, they keep an Esper Sentinel alive. They've got a basic Plains. So then I have to let them draw another card here because like I need to hit land drops. Aid plus hammer. Yeah. We're pretty done here. Like Blood Moon doesn't do anything, Counterspell doesn't do anything. We're just way too far behind. All right. Better hand, Channeler plus Bauble on 1. We've got Counterspell on 2. We've got to consider Iteration. So, kind of feeling this hand. Keeping Unholy Heat on top. Burnt and Forge Tender ultimately is like fine. Double Esper Sentinel on turn 2. Like pretty close to like worst case scenario for me there. Do find a land, so we're not like completely hopeless. Oh man. The old triple Esper Sentinel start. Then they get a Sword of Fire and Ice. So this is like, I already don't think I could beat triple Esper Sentinel, but triple Esper Sentinel plus a Sword of Fire and Ice is just like way too much to overcome. So we stopped a couple draws, but we got to give him one. Oh, we didn't even talk about sideboarding. Brought out like, oh yeah, I did. Talked about bringing out the Spyros, a couple of these Dragon's Rage Channelers. I ended up deciding to leave in the Ragavans on the play. boarded in like engineered explosives. I've gotten a braid in, 2 dress downs, 2 furies, all that sort of good stuff. But like I boarded in the second blood moon on the play, boarded it out on the no, boarded in both on the draw, boarded one out on the play just to be more proactive. But so here I just didn't think about timing. Um, if I dress down after, or no, I don't think it even stops the trigger on this. So it doesn't really matter. They're gonna get to kill stuff regardless. See, I really don't think there's like anything I can draw here that matters. Just triple Esper Sentinel is obnoxious to have to fight through. Maybe if I had had a what's it called? Engineered explosives there really early, I might have had a chance, but without that, pretty game over. So we're on the play, no lands, pretty easy ship. And then this is exactly what I was talking about earlier with like being the best Ragavan deck. You can clear out the way for your Ragavan from blockers. You can protect your Ragavan from removal. And then like putting us on the play with a hand like this is just even more ridiculous. It's like, hey, you have to answer Ragavan on turn 1. There's so much pressure to have to deal with this right now or you die. All right. Steam Vents, Otherworldly Gaze means probably a dredge list. Like, could mean Crab Vine, but I don't think I've seen Crab Vine with the Steam Vents. So either way, we're gonna jam Blood Moon and hope that they're on like a what's it called? Thrilling Discovery draw instead of a Cathartic Reunion draw. If it is Crab Vine, this just like locks them out of the game. But yes, there's Cathartic Reunion. They don't ditch a Dredger, which is really nice. Now we've got Counterspell up. So that does ditch double Dredger, so we're gonna counterspell that one. I'm guessing they drew both of those thugs off of the first Cathartic Reunion. Because if they didn't, I don't think there's a big reason to not just like ditch a Dredger when you can. But either way, Spyro's going to ditch Ragavan, Unholy Heat. Find another island. So, like, after this turn, we're going to have Counterspell up again and just, like, more pressure with this Spyro and the tokens. And opponent's dead next turn, so we're just going to sit on Counterspell, Spell Pierce, and, like, not try to play their Cathartic Reunion or anything. Sideboarding against Dredge. Brought in like the Fluster Storms. So we could say like brought in Fluster, Fluster, Fluster. One of Dress Down I brought in mainly because it stops triggers on things like Stinkweed Imp from killing my guys. It stops Oxyvagonus trigger when it enters. Just little stuff like that. Nothing like major. But it's better than some of the spot removal and like Blood Moon against the deck that needs red aggressively anyway. And then I brought in the 2 unlicensed hearses. Just boarded out like some spot removal and Blood Moons. All right. So turn one Ragavan, turn two unlicensed hearse. Hope it's good enough. Plays a Leyline of the Void, which is a-okay. Decide to bobble scry there. The only thing I would keep on top would be Spell Pierce. So if I see exactly Spell Pierce, I'm not shuffling away and playing the Ragavan. If I do see Spell Pierce, then I'll leave it there to try to Spell Pierce a Cathartic Reunion on two. Looks like they decide to reunion for a couple lands or a couple of prized amalgams. I'm guessing just set up for like next turn. So we're gonna play this hearse, and I'm not gonna activate it here because at the end of the day, like the prized amalgams don't do anything. But if they go for like another cathartic reunion and I get to hit some dredgers, that's really good. So like this stinkweed imp that hits here. Realistically, should have hit the stinkweed and one of the prized amalgams. But I kind of figured that they're not dredging off of this, so like I uh don't really care about the stink or the prized amalgams just yet. And then I guess they drew poorly because they just scoop on the spot. But we were in a really good space anyway. Like we had counterspell up after this. We could hit with Ragavan, play Ledger Shredder, hold up, counterspell, whatever. So always feels really, really good to beat Dredge, especially in just like two straight games. All right, match number 3 on the play again. Opening hand looks fine. Got a turn 2 threat, interaction, card advantage spell, big payoff. Just try to figure out what we're up against. So Otawara Serum Visions makes me think it's a mirror match. No companion revealed. Otawara is definitely a staple in Murktide. Serum Visions, I've seen like a couple lists run a Serum Visions or two. So my thought is that um, it's Murktide. I don't know for sure, but it's like as reasonable of a guess as any, right? Here's a Shredder. Just throw away an extra land. Storm. See a Desperate Ritual on top of their library. Uh oh. Uh oh. Okay. Unholy Heat's a really good pickup here. Because now I can cast this Expressive Iteration. This puts Sorcery in the yard. I cast the Unholy Heat, trigger the Ledger Shredder, and I can connive away like a Murktide and get Delirium to kill the Brawl. So that's huge. As long as they don't have like a main deck Apostle's Blessing. All right. So I'm really, really glad that my opponent just went for like a main phase ritual gifts here. They end up net neutral on cards, but they lose the ritual there. So I'm gonna ditch a couple more rituals in their yard and just kind of try to play towards owning the mana advantage. See a Manamorphose on top of their library. I'm going to assume that through a counter spell, they're not going to be able to go off on this turn. Especially if I like counterspell a brawl or something. So my hope here is just like counterspell something this turn, counterspell something next turn, and close the game out. Sleight of hand is fine. And then, like, if they don't do anything major this turn, then I just get to, like, untap with double counterspell next turn. But, like, Electromancer, even though it itself doesn't win the game, um, I'm pretty happy just, like, getting it off the board. I could Expressive Iteration there looking for, like, a Lightning Bolt, but I think my odds are a little bit better at holding up 2 pieces of interaction on my opponent's turn. Um, I kind of mull over this decision a little bit. So if they've got a Past in Flames, which they do, I saw it off of a bobble earlier, and I know they've got Manamorphose off of that gifts that they cast. My concern is if I let this resolve, they go for a Manamorphose, and I respond with Unholy Heat, and then they just have like a ritual in hand, or no, worst case, 2 rituals, and they get to hard cast Past in Flames mana, then I'm kind of screwed. If I let rituals resolve, then they can Past in Flames. I have to counterspell, and assuming they've got enough mana, which 2 rituals and a Manamorphose would be 1, 3, 5, 8 total. Past in Flames is 4, counterspell. But if I counterspell the first ritual, then I don't get there. Remand also throws a really big wrench in the plans. So I just decided to like go ahead and counterspell the Brawl. And if they remand this, I can replay counterspell. And here, when they go for this Manamorphose, the hope is just that they don't have enough mana to go off. Like, they very well could, but they would have to have 3 rituals here. Like, their hand would have to be 3 rituals Past in Flames, or another Brawl, Manamorphose ritual, something like that. But I can respond to like a Brawl or an Electromancer into ritual with Unholy Heat. So glad to win that one after not knowing what my opponent was on. It's interesting to see somebody on Storm. Like, I think Storm is in a decent spot right now in the meta. Murktide's on the decline because of Leyline Binding. Storm doesn't really care about Leyline Binding decks. It's not too difficult to play around Grave Hate like Endurance. So sideboarding, board out like Spyros, some Blood Moons, Unholy Heat, because Unholy Heat's not always going to kill Baral on turn 2, but Lightning Bolt is. Board in one of the 2 hearses. Usually Storm boards out of like the heavy grave interaction, like Past in Flames, after game 1, because you're expecting a lot of Grave Hate. So wanted to not overdo the Grave Hate, but I boarded in like the 3 Fluster Storms, which are fantastic in this matchup, obviously. The Mystical Dispute, and the 2 EE to help fight over like Empty the Warrens. So Spell Pierce on top, we'll take that. So we've got interaction for a Brawl or an Electromancer. And if you haven't played a lot of Storm, or played against a lot of Storm, which I'm sure a lot of people that are like picking up Modern recently haven't played against a lot of Storm, you really don't want to tap out going into their turn 3. It seems like, oh, they don't have a mana reducer on board, I'm probably safe. Like, Like if they just go Brawl, Ritual, or Brawl, Manamorphose, Ritual, Ritual, Gifts Ungiven, you're just deterministically dead. So I'd much rather just hold up interaction here, and I can like unlicense Hearse next turn. But I actually decided just to keep holding up interaction. Like I think if I tap down to one piece of interaction, that's when I give myself a really big chance of just losing on the spot. Like if I play an unlicensed hearse and they go cast a brawl, cast a ritual. Now I have to decide between trying to interact with the ritual or trying to interact with the brawl. If I go like lightning bolt on the brawl and they have another ritual or manamorphose into another ritual effect, then I've lost the game. Nothing else I can do. If I rely on interacting with the ritual and they have another ritual, same kind of situation. I'm probably pretty close to dead on board. So now it becomes okay, I have to rely on Flusterstorm. So if they have a Flusterstorm of their own at any point, then Flusterstorm's negated. Plus the fact that they've just got like plenty of mana to work with. So if they do get like Brawl, Ritual, Past in Flames, whatever, um, and start actually going off, I might not have anything like worth Fluster Storming. It all depends on how much mana they can create, and it's just not worth it. Like if they storm off and put a grape shot on the board or on the stack, and I do get to Fluster Storm a grape shot, there's a reasonable chance they're going to have enough mana to just like flashback grape shot immediately. So we're going to try to wait for a spot where we've got two pieces of interaction. So, into turn, they ritual into this gift, which makes me assume that they've got Flusterstorm in hand. I was like, why would you ritual into a gift? And so I decide to Flusterstorm the gifts. If they want to Flusterstorm by Flusterstorm, that's fine. I could let gifts resolve since I have the unlicensed hearse, but realistically, I'm kind of hoping that they'll just fight over the gifts. Because obviously, my interaction gets a lot worse if there's nothing on the stack. So, take a counter spell. See if the opponent goes for another copy of gifts. Not. So, all I'm really looking for now is a payoff. Like, got a decent amount of interaction. I need something to get on the board and protect. Because ultimately, like if you give Storm all the time in the world, they're probably going to find a line that's going to win through interaction. All right, Channeler. We've got something. It's not great, but it's something. And I do want to just fire off this bolt here. I'm trying to get Delirium, but I also just want like more action. Delirium would have been the best thing, but get what you get. All right. Ragavan, Chandler, whole bunch of interaction. And a Mystical Dispute on the Brawl to hope that they just like tap out for this. This is kind of what I was talking about. Like, very reasonable chance that they just find enough interaction to get there. So they did have Brawl, double counter spell, rituals, Wish finds Grape Shot, and they just have this Grape Shot that they got off Wish, and then they have another Grape Shot in hand. We can go through it if you want to, but it's just a matter of like they had the stuff they needed. Let's just skip on to game 3. Don't think I really changed anything up between game 1 and game 2, or game 2 and game 3. I guess I boarded out one Spyro, brought in the 4th Unholy Heat, or the 1st Unholy Heat. But nothing too major. Pretty bad hand on the play. I've got Empty the Warrens covered, but I don't have Delirium or anything else. Not a great hand either, but hey, we've got a bunch of redraws. We've got some filtering. I usually treat Storm kind of like a life total doesn't matter matchup, uh, which I know is weird to say with Grape Shot, but most of the time, like if they've got enough mana for to go off with a Grape Shot, or enough resources to go off with a Grape Shot, like your life total probably didn't matter. So the difference between like 17 and 13 is probably pretty negligible. Here, getting down Hearse. Opponent could have a line where they go like Ritual, Manamorphose, Brawl, Ritual, Manamorphose. Just like an insane go off, but like the likelihood of Storm going off on turn 2 through a piece of Grave Hate is really, really low. So I'm kind of just assuming that if I get down this Hearse now, I might not have to tap down for it again. And again, I don't think Unlicensed Hearse is some like unbeatable card in the matchup, which is why I only board in 1. And we saw that in like game 2. They went off through us having Grave Hate and interaction and whatnot. Opponent going Manamorphose Brawl there makes me think that they did not have the land, because if they did, they would have played it before the Brawl. You kind of give yourself that backdoor out of like, oh, if I go to kill the Brawl, you respond with Ritual, Manamorphose, Gifts, whatever you can cast there. All right. So here, just decide to attack with the Hearse. Like, I've got Lightning Bolt and Flusterstorm. I need to get the game over with. Opponent's got a very painful mana base right now, and they're missing land drops. So we're just going to try to get damage in. Man, Ragavan is fine. Like here, I've got Unlicensed Hearse eating a couple more cards. I've got Bolt to the Face, Dash Ragavan next turn. So like I'm presenting lethal for next turn, as long as I don't die here. And with Hearse up to a 5/5, if I play this Ragavan crew with the Hearse, like I'm hoping I can just force a chump block and then go to the double bolt for lethal so that they don't have access to like a 2-mana spell here. So throw that away. Bolt here. It's got a Flusterstorm, and we've got a Flusterstorm back for their Flusterstorm. And a whole bunch of clicking and countering and things leaving the stack and whatnot. And yeah, there we go. I guess I don't want to give spoilers because I think it comes up in this league. So I'll just like hold opinions momentarily. Had a comment I was gonna make about Flusterstorm, but like I said, I think it comes up in this league. All right, match number 4. We're currently 2-1 on the play. Good hand. Turn 1 Channeler. Turn 2 Consider. Whatever. Turn 3 Blood Moon. Opponent reveals Obosh the Prey Piercer. So hand is much less exciting against an Obosh deck. Obviously, Blood Moon against a deck that's like built around playing Blood Moons is a lot less exciting. Then them leading on turn 1 Relic is even worse for me. So all around, not good times to be had here. Opponent showing innate knowledge of the stack. Get our basic. Gonna keep the Unholy Heat on top. Like if they go for a Dash Ragavan or something, then maybe I want to cast that. Expressive Iteration, just to try to dig for like more islands and stuff. And I could have just gone for like Lightning Bolt there to try to get Delirium online, but I don't think it really does like a ton for me here. Let's pop out the graveyard. I always hate this like popping in and out of this window whenever something in the graveyard gets targeted. Why are you going away now? Come back here. Graveyard's being a pain. All right. Spyro, ditch a Fable and a Bolt. Sure. Now if they're tapped off of Relic, maybe I can get a little bit of damage in. So I keep the Murktide on top because if I happen to hit a land off this iteration, I can just play the Murktide right now. But of course, it was not meant to be. And there is our land. So decide just to keep the land on top in case for whatever reason they don't pop the Relic. But I can't imagine a world in which case they don't pop the Relic. But either way, we get to Spyro, gum up the board a bit. Just go ahead and ditch this Murktide. We've got another one in the deck, so if I happen to find it, cool. But this one at least is dead at the moment. Magus, I don't care about since I've got all these lightning bolts. So I'm kind of trying to come up with a way that I can like bait my opponent into playing something important here. Like, hey, I'll iteration, whatever, tap down to 3 mana, all red. And hopefully if they go for something big, then I can like lightning bolt the Magus and then fetch up another island and counter spell. single Bone Crusher is not going to do it, but other Bone Crusher, a little bit more annoying, but I'll just save the counter spell. Like, I could counterspell the Bone Crusher, but I just don't think that's like, or counterspell the Stomp. I just don't think it's like doing enough for me right there. Like, honestly, I'm not in that bad of a spot. Opponent's got 2 cards. They got a Blast Zone. They do have this Den of the Bugbears, so if they happen to find a 5th land here, they could activate that. Keep up the Spyro in case they decide to attack. And here, I'm counterspelling in the hopes that they just like follow this up with a Bone Crusher and I get to connive. But opponent decides to be a jerk instead and go and bolt my Shredder on my upkeep. Good attack there, but I don't want to have to make a choice between Unholy Heating the Den and Unholy Heating the Ragavan. So I'm just going to kind of cover both of them. But now that we found a Ragavan, we can at least dash that. One off of the Fury. So punished for not playing out this Spire Bluff Canal earlier. Which there were a couple times I thought about it, but I was like, if I find a Ledger Shredder and a couple more spells, like I want to connive it away. But I should have just played it out sooner. I remember when Spikefield Hazard was an answered Uro. Like, your opponent would cast their Uro, the sack it trigger goes on the stack, they draw their card, play the land, whatever. And then you Spikefield Hazard the Uro before it gets sacked. And because Spikefield Hazard has a replacement effect of if the target would die this turn, exile it instead. They just like exiled their Uro. They got the one trigger, but they couldn't escape it. All right. Probably should have just double blocked here. I was kind of thinking I didn't want to in case they had like another relic or something. But I think I should have just taken the opportunity to like trade off with the Bone Crusher. Maybe should have kept the first Ragavan. Ends up not mattering since I found the second Ragavan, but perhaps should have just kept the first one so that I could go ahead and attack with it. Right, Ramanap Ruins doesn't do a whole lot for me. Yuck. So now they got an Obosh in hand. Now they're furying me. Play the Blood Moon just because it shuts off like Ramanap Ruins and Den of the Bugbear and these blast zones and stuff. And then I've got the Seasoned Pyromancer in the yard to get back tokens from. I don't know if there's really a reason to only attack with the Fury there instead of the Fury and the Bone Crusher. Maybe they thought I was going to top deck like a live spell that just took out Fury and Obosh or something. But my only real out at this point is to find like expressive iteration for double bolt or iteration for like uh bolt and Murktide or something like that. Double block the Bone Crusher just to get a threat off the board. And Mishra's Bauble Sea Spikefield Hazard. So it's just straight up like, hey, if you don't draw something live here, like an Unholy Heat for Obosh, pretty dead. And we do not. So opponent swings in. Just in case I'd misread Obosh there. It does count itself as an odd numbered or odd CMC permanent. So I thought it did. Might as well double check. Sideboarding, board out Blood Moons, board out some Dragon's Rage Channelers and Ragavans because they're pretty good at getting on the board, clogging up the ground. Like Dragon's Rage Channeler against a deck that's main boarding like 3 or 4 copies of Relic and Progenitus, as well as Spikefield Hazard, whatnot. It's pretty bad. Ragavan just gets like eaten up by tokens. I'm okay keeping a couple copies in on the play. Boarded in a Subtlety is just like another answer to Fury, as well as Obosh coming down. Boarded in 1 copy of Unlicensed Hearse to help fight over like Seasoned Pyromancers. The tokens clogging up the board is pretty rough. Plus, it's just like a reasonably sized body after a few turns. And boarded in the Dress Downs to fight over Seasoned Pyromancer ETB, the Fury ETB, Obosh turns, anything like that. And then boarded in the 2 Furies. Help try to clear up the board. A little Fury on Fury violence. But the plus side is our opponent has lost over half of their clock in that game. So that's a pretty big chunk gone. I'm never going to play to the clock, but just something to keep in mind. Play out fetches and pass. I don't know if I'm wanting to get a basic island yet, or if I'm wanting to cast something like red. So I'm just kind of reserving that decision until later. So here's a Magus. Got the lightning bolt, so I just say sure. Like maybe if my opponent doesn't think I have the counter spell, they'll be a little more brazen with some of their choices. Like perhaps I can catch them off guard with like a Seasoned Pyromancer or something if they think that I just don't have a counter spell. And then saving Otawara as long as I can, because I can always use it to bounce like a Blood Moon. Don't think I want to Fable the Mirror Breaker to resolve. And if you remember when I said my opponent already lost half their clock, they're already down like 3 minutes here on clock. And we're only on turn 4. And they're down to 3 cards. They've got a couple redraws, but we're not looking like we're anywhere close to dead. Exiling lands out of the yard in case I happen to find a Murktide. And then let the Magus go because I can just untap and Fury. Depending on what I drew there, I might just like hard cast the Fury. I might evoke the Fury, but since I just drew like another land, they could play like a Fury of their own and kill my Fury, but then I get to untap Fury their Fury and hold up counter spells. So, like, okay with that exchange. Instead, they play a Chalice on one. Again, like my opponent earlier, is pretty okay with me. Like, I can Otawara to bounce the Chalice at some point if I find just a bunch of stuff that cares about it. Then I can start just like eating stuff with unlicensed hearse so that maybe I just hard cast Fury and uh, crew it. But I kind of decide that I just like don't care about the Chalice. Like, I could keep holding up Otawara, but really it's whatever. My opponent's super low on cards. Chalice is shutting them off of like lightning bolts and stuff. Wanna evoke Fury on my Fury. Cool. Just gonna keep chilling on counterspell. This is kind of the point where it really starts hitting. Oh yeah, they are down to like under 5 minutes. Uh, they don't have anything on board that actually kills me. If they had a man land, this might be a little different, but at the moment they don't. And they're taking like 30 plus seconds per turn. Picking up Blast Zone, sure. Easy counter on this Fable. And we'll just play out our little 4/4 Murktide. Get in and attack. And I could have crewed up again. I didn't really do the math here of if there was a line that allowed me to like attack with the Murktide or the Hearse at certain points to play through like these blast zones and stuff. For instance, if I crew the Hearse and attack, and my opponent just cracks the blast zone right now, then I've got a 4/4 Murktide that's 4 turns to kill. And they would have to spend 4 turns ticking up blast zone. So I win the race. I kill them on the turn that they put the 7th counter onto blast zone, but they don't get to untap and kill the Murktide, assuming they don't hit another land. But if I attack with the Murktide now, then they do get to add 2 counters to the blast zone, which means that they can kill the Murktide in 3 turns instead of 4, and be able to kill the Murktide and then untap and have blast zone for the unlicensed hearse. So maybe I was supposed to think about that a little bit more, but I was kind of thinking like, oh, if they spend their next 3 turns just like ticking up blast zone, then I'll find something. This is the point that I'm like, oh, if they blast zone away the unlicensed hearse, then I win the race with Murktide. But if I had thought about that a turn sooner, then I probably would have just like fired up the Murktide or fired up the Hearse last turn. And they would have had one less counter on the Blast Zone now. So I would attack for 4. They'd tick up to 6. I'd attack for 4. They'd tick up to 7. I'd attack for 4. Then they would be dead. But at the moment, I'm kind of thinking I'm just going to hit him with Murktide a couple times and it's probably going to be okay. Like I know I'm going to get one more attack in with Murktide here. So we put them down to 2. They're going to have Blast Zone taking up to 7s. They can take out the Murktide. But all I really need to do is find like a Ledger Shredder wins the game. I've got Subtlety. I've got... I think they dealt with both of my Furies. Yeah. Subtlety, Ledger Shredder. A Braid for Chalice. Plus, like, I've got these double Ragavans and stuff. Like, got a decent number of ways to actually, like, end the game. And they've got now Sekinzen tokens. But less than a minute on the clock. And they're attacking for 2. So it's an 8-turn clock on their end. I could fire off the Dress Down just to, like, try to get another draw. But either way, that's how it goes. So like I said, we had 8 turns. All I really needed to do is find what's it called? Ledger Shredder. So I could play Ledger Shredder, play one of these 1-drops, anyone into the Chalice, draw or connive off of the Ledger Shredder, ditch, whatever. That gives me a 2-power guy. They had like a Flame Slash in hand, so I'm assuming they had more cards that were cut off by Chalice. But if I just find that and then like Dress Down a Fury getting hard cast, but I assume if they had a Fury, they would have just cast it by now. But yeah, that would have been pretty easy way to find victory if there was more time. It would have just meant going to game 3, but ultimately, Moto Chess Clock sometimes just gets you there. So match number 4, sitting at 3-1 on the play. Yet again, Ragavans and draw spells and Murktide. I mean, that's like all this deck is, right? Ragavans, Dragon's Rage Channelers, draw spells. Some counter spells thrown in there. Arid Mace and no companion leads me to believe burn. But I was going to say, like, burn not having a 1-drop creature, not having a 1-mana play to interact with Ragavan probably means it's not burn. Hit fire and ice, so I'm assuming this is like a Rhinos deck. So if this is Rhinos, my goal number 1 becomes find counter spells. Counter spells, spell pierce, something like that. Just find interaction. And since I've got this Consider, I'm okay playing out the Dragon's Rage Channeler, because now if they play like a Wrenn and 6 and go to ping, or a Fire and try to ping both for 1, I can Consider and at least keep my Dragon's Rage Channeler alive. So, plus. Don't care about Bobble. Don't care about Scalding Tarn. We will dash to Ragavan. Archon. Okay, so it's creativity. I think I should have played a 4/4 Murktide right there. Like, I cut my channeler off of Delirium, but I think it plays a lot better into something like a Teferi, or I could have just played like a 3/3 Murktide. Still, so if I exile land, artifact, land, creature, creature, I could have a 3/3 Murktide. I play a Ragavan, or like dash a Ragavan, play the other Ragavan, play the fetch land. That gets me back up to Delirium. And I've got a 3/3 Channeler, a 3/3 Murktide, and a dashing Ragavan, and they can just never fetch again. Um, Obviously, if they have just like fetch for basic mountain, play Unholy Heat or something, then that stops that. But I think that would have been the better line. Instead, I go for like the 4/4 Murktide here and shrink the Channeler. Because I just wasn't thinking about, oh yeah, they've got they could have an actual land in hand. I was thinking that they would need to Wrenn and 6, tick up and get the land to be able to creativity, but they just had the Dwarven Mind, which means they get to ping the Channeler, play the creativity, get the Archon. So we're just like super done to the Archon. So yeah, as soon as I realized it was creativity and I didn't have a counter spell, I should have gone full aggro. Play out the Murktide. Next turn, dash the Ragavan. Like I said, put them down to 1 so they can't fetch. Fortunately, creativity seems like a reasonable matchup for Murktide. You just get to bring in like all your counter spells, these Fluster Storms, Mystical Disputes. If you've got Spell Pierces, board out some of the spot removal, bring in Engineered Explosives, and just like find a threat and counter everything under the sun. So it's an okay 7. Turn 1 Ragavan. They've got answers, but kind of just hoping they don't have one. And if they don't, then I get like a huge mana advantage starting on turn 2. Last they do, but we do find counterspell for like a turn 2 Wrenn. Um, Decided to keep the snow-covered island there because I want to hit land drops and I want to be able to play around my own blood moons that are in the deck. So snow-covered island kind of does both of that. And if I just like aggressively fetch out snow-covered island, then my opponent's going to be playing around blood moon every chance they get. So speak of the devil. And here I'm just kind of hoping I can catch my opponent like playing a creativity or something this turn, counterspell, untap blood moon. Just interact with whatever they put on the stack here and then get to untap and blood moon. But they do have a spell pierce, which probably I could have seen coming. Like they were just playing something, a 3-drop on turn 4 with mana open, but ultimately it is what it is. Spell Pierce is reasonable since they missed their 4th land drop, but I don't think it's like winning me the game. I think I need to find actual threats. But this is looking really bad. Worst case scenario would be like they discard an Archon and they've got to persist, but they discard a Leyline Binding and a Lightning Bolt, which does not feel really any better for me. Take out Teferi, try to keep them from hitting more land drops. Now, I don't know if there's a reason they downticked with Teferi. Like, I get wanting to draw a card, but I don't think that's really doing anything for you. Especially not twice. Like, you want to hit land drops, sure. All for it. But I think just having Teferi alive and able to, like, prevent me from countering anything is just way more important. So we got the old triple Teferi here. Plus another Wrenn and 6. All right. Really surprised they didn't tutor up a Dwarven Mine here to save the Teferi. But ultimately, we are just relying on counter spells and spell pierce. And I was kind of hoping that because they didn't tutor up a Dwarven Mine there, that they just wouldn't have a creativity to cast, or they wouldn't have another land to get another dwarf token. But then, like right there, that tutor up a dwarf to block the Ragavan, to me, kind of says like I've got nothing. I've either got like a few extra lands in hand, or spell pierces, something like that. Just something in hand that's not doing anything relevant. So cast the Ledger Shredder first. So if they start trying to interact, I get to connive. And here, I'm only counterspelling because I get to connive off of this. And grow this Ledger Shredder. All right. This is just like the most absurdly convoluted, not anything going on stack that I've seen. Okay, so I mentioned earlier comments about Flusterstorm. This is the point. So my opponent cast a Flusterstorm, or I cast a Flusterstorm on their spell pierce. I'm just trying to tap them down low so that I can spell pierce whatever their last piece of interaction is, whether they find like a Leyline Binding or something, or I could counter this Veil of Summer so they don't get to draw a card, just something like that. Because I'm trying to just end the game right here on this attack. So they Flusterstorm, or I Flusterstorm their spell pierce. Is that what it was? I have to go back to the tape over here. They cast Veil of Summer. I target Veil of Summer with Counterspell. They target Counterspell with Spell Pierce. I target Spell Pierce with Flusterstorm. They target Flusterstorm with Flusterstorm. they did not let me put my Flusterstorm copies on the stack. Instead, they uh, responded to the storm trigger on Flusterstorm by casting their Flusterstorm. So now they get to resolve their Flusterstorm on whatever copies they want. I'm not going to pay because I get to now resolve the storm trigger on my Flusterstorm. And I'm just going to put all the copies on Veil of Summer. So if you want to pay 4 mana, resolve the Veil of Summer, that's fine. But like the power of Flusterstorm is getting to copy or to getting the storm counter and counter all the copies of your opponent's spell. So they could have just like let my storm trigger resolve, let me designate where I'm putting my copies, and then Flusterstorm and decide where their copies want to go. But because they responded to the storm trigger of my Flusterstorm, then I got to, after their Flusterstorm resolves, put all my copies on the stack, targeting whatever I felt like. So, if you've got a Flusterstorm, let the storm trigger happen first. All right, so this is match 5, game 3. We're on the draw. I don't think I made any big sideboard changes after game 2. Brought in a Fury. Just like, I think I brought in some extra Unholy Heats. Brought out some Lightning Bolts to help interact with Planeswalkers a bit better. Brought in a Fury to help interact with like Teferi a little more. So bobble myself, see if it's something I'm like super interested in. Murktide I think is like fair enough. I could just play land Ragavan, but between Unholy Heat, Wrenn and 6, Fire and Ice, there's so many ways that they get to like tempo positive kill my Ragavan that I would rather just like hold up Spell Pierce here for a Wrenn and 6. Like, I think more often than not, the way they're going to win is Planeswalkers. The way that I'm going to win is Murktide plus like a counter spell for a creativity. So I want to fight over, like, I don't think post board, especially when I get like all these Flusterstorms and stuff, I don't think they're going to beat me with any sort of an early creativity. Now, a late game creativity, maybe like a turn 6, 7 creativity backed up by a couple pieces of interaction, maybe that kills me. But I don't think I'm going to lose to a turn 4 creativity. And I'm assuming this is just like game 2, where this was like a Fable backed up by a Flusterstorm. So Flusterstorm my own is really good. Let's go ahead and get this EE out there. I can always just like use the 2 treasure tokens to pay for the EE, so I don't really like lose anything. And this is kind of what I was talking about with, I don't think I'm going to lose to creativity. Like, I've got heat. I can just straight up pay for Flusterstorm here. Since I've got like plenty of mana, I think that's what I'm going to do. I could Flusterstorm there, Flusterstorm, but I think I'd rather just like hold on to it. And then they gift me this lovely little Wrenn and 6 that looks pretty good with a Fiery Islet on board. So we'll do that. I only have 2 pieces of interaction. I could hold up like Bad Mana Leak, Mystical Dispute, and Flusterstorm, but we're just gonna hope they don't have another token maker and a creativity and another Flusterstorm in hand. Because I think that's about the only way they beat me here is like another fetch land for a Dwarven Mine, creativity. I have to Flusterstorm, and then they've got like a Flusterstorm for my Flusterstorm. So either way, yeah, get that one, fortunately. And then next turn, if they didn't do anything, like they're dead on board to Ragavan, Murktide, Ren Ping. But if they did do something like Leyline Binding a Murktide or whatever, then I could just start like sacking Fiery Islet, getting it back with Ren, and refueling my hand pretty aggressively. But either way, that is another nice little 4-1 with Murktide. So the main difference between the two builds was the Blood Moon versus the Archmage's Charm in the main deck. I think the Blood Moon has like a lot of potential in the current expected meta, which is a lot of like creativity lists. Archmage's Charm's also decent in that matchup, so it's not like a big percentage gain by going from a counter spell for creativity to a Blood Moon. Seasoned Pyromancer, though, I think is like a really good option. Not necessarily meta dependent, just like in the deck in general. And going down to 2 Murktides was kind of interesting. Ultimately, like, deck performs very reasonably. I think if you're playing in like a challenge or something, I'd maybe want to find another good card or 2 for Hammer Time. But I don't really know off the top of my head what that would be, since you've already got Blood Moon, Dress Down, Fury, Engineered Explosives, a Braid, that kind of stuff. But oh, I didn't even realize this list. A Braid was not the last card in the sideboard. It was Jace the Mind Sculptor was the last card in the board, and I don't think it ever came in, or I don't think I was in a match where I really cared about Jace. Maybe once or twice it came in just because I needed an extra card, but I don't think it did anything relevant. But it's really good in the mirror, so keep that in mind. Anyway, like I said in the last video, I'm probably going to play this deck on stream a little bit this week. I think it's like a reasonable spot right now. And then again, I'm trying to take the play patterns in this deck and kind of utilize them towards the shadow builds right now. So working on that, getting a little more comfortable. So either way, we'll try that out, see how it goes. Hope everybody has an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all later live on stream at twitch.tv/the_control freak. Adios for now.